Okay, let's review where we left off. I'm going to drag the history marker back. Let's go all the way back to sketch number 1, and I'll turn on the visibility of sketch number 1. So we created one simple sketch. We did 3 rectangles, a large rectangle, a smaller one, and we offset the larger rectangle. So actually we created 4 rectangles if we consider the offset. But a real simple sketch number 1. And then we extruded the back plate, and then we extruded a finger tab on one side and a finger tab on another side. We did a pattern along the top, a pattern along the sides, and then initially we did 2 mirrors, mirror this over to here, this down to here, but actually we could do that with one circular pattern to get those finger tabs. And then we did a thin feature extrude over here using just this single line from sketch number 1. Again, one simple sketch so far. And then we did a combined cut to cut the slots into the side. We mirrored that side over to the other side. We did the same thing up at the top. We combined cut and we mirrored that down to the bottom. But we need to put the finger tabs in between these 2 components. And when I start to do that, I realize that I want to make a change in how I model this, because we have both of these components, the top component and the side component, we'll make these into components later, are interfering with each other. So I want to change the way I did that so I can go back in history. So I'm going to drag the timeline back until I made this first extrusion, the thin feature extrusion. And I'm going to right click, I'm going to say edit that feature, and then I'm going to hold down the control key. I assume that's command on Mac. I'm going to turn off chaining, and I'm going to control unselect this original selection, and then I want to select this line. Now I want to make sure I get that line, not the edge of the part. If you see only one edge highlight, then you've got the edge of the part. I'll select it. Notice the line going all the way down here. I'll select that line. What we could do is we could turn off the body and make sure we get just that line. I'll turn that body back on. And then when I see this, I see that it is on this side of the line. I want it over on that side of the line. So I'm going to tell this to side 2. Okay, but I don't want it coming all the way up to here. That's why I selected this offset line inside here. And I'll say okay to that. Now, one of the things that drives beginners crazy is when their model doesn't update properly. But if we do everything in a robust fashion using the Born technique, as we drag this over, so now we've done the combined cut, and everything should update. We'll do the mirror, and so the mirror also has the new feature, so everything updates. And sometimes what we could do is a control B or command B to force an update. It rebuilds the model, make sure that everything updates without any errors. You don't want any yellow or red highlighted errors down here on the timeline. If you get that, you need to fix those immediately. Alright, so I'm going to drag this back again before I did the combine, and now I want to put the tabs up here and down here, and so this is on this side component. So I'm going to turn on the visibility of the origin, and I'm going to do a new sketch on the what is that, the ZY plane, and I'm going to draw a line out horizontally from the origin some distance. Now I want to dimension that as our thickness, and so I start to type in the variable name and it comes up. So I made that 7mm line. Now I could have projected the edges of the part, but I'm trying to avoid dependencies like projections as much as possible, because if something's going to fail, that's going to cause a fail. Whenever we're designing something in the future or as we're going along, we're always making changes as we make decisions about our geometry. And we want those changes to always be predictable and to update. And so by reducing the number of dependencies, we're less likely to have something not update correctly. I'll draw another line from the end of this 7mm line, and then I'm going to dimension from the origin over to the end of this line, and I'm going to dimension that as our depth. Okay, so if I looked at this from the side, so it comes out here to this side. Now again, I could have projected this edge, but that creates a dependency that I would rather avoid. Now this line is actually the depth, so it goes from the end of this 7mm line over to here, and the full depth. So this line is actually the depth minus 7, and so that means I can draw a line to the midpoint of that line. So I'm going to draw a line to the midpoint of this line, and I'm going to go up. Okay, and I accidentally exited my sketch. Let me go back into my sketch. And so then I know that this line is going to stay halfway between here and here, not halfway to the back side over here, but between here and here. And it's depending on the design intent, but that's what I want. I'm then going to draw a rectangle out here in space. Now I wanted to use just a single line and do a thin feature, but when I tried to do that, I couldn't get it to work correctly. I don't have to do this, but I'm going to change these lines to constructions. So I'll select those, I'll right click and change those to constructions. I'm going to do a midpoint between this line and the end of this line. I'll then dimension from here to here, and this will be the height of the object. So I'll type in h divided by 2 because we're only going on one side of this. Okay, so that moves that up so it's parallel or collinear with this. Again, we could have projected that, but that creates a dependency that I want to avoid if I don't need it. And then I'll dimension this. Now I might have put in some kind of formula to determine what these tabs should be. I'm not sure where the original designer came up with the numbers, but I'm just going to put in 52, the same number that was used originally, and then I'm going to dimension this as the thickness. And so there we go. So I have a rectangle up here at the top. Now notice the rectangle is on the origin plane, so as much as possible I try to use only the origin planes as reference. And we're going to, now that's as much as possible and practical. We're going to violate that just a little bit here just in a second. I'm going to do an extrude, and I'm going to tell it for the distance I want to go is thickness. And we see the preview. I want to join it to the existing body, and then but I need it to be over here. So I'm going to say, instead of going from starting from the profile plane, I'm going to start from the object. And when I did that, it changed my distance. So let's change that thickness again. And figure out what I did wrong here. I don't know how this got back onto profile plane, but I want it on object, and I'll select that face, and now it moved it over there. I don't know what I did there. I'll go back through the video and see how that switched off of object. Alright, and I'll say OK to that. Alright, now I'll do a rectangular pattern of that. So I'll do a rectangular pattern. I need to put it on features. I'll select that feature, and for the axis I'll select the y-axis. I always select the origin axis if possible rather than an edge on the part, and then I want 3 copies, and for that distance 75 apart, and let's put those symmetrical about their original. So we see that there's 3 tabs. I'll say OK to that. Now I'll mirror those 3 tabs to the other side. So I'll do the mirror, and I'll select features, and I'll select the original seed feature and then the dependent pattern, and I want to mirror that about this plane. We see it appears down here, and I'm going to put this to identical, although it may not make any difference in this case. Alright, so now I have those tabs mirrored to the other side. When I do this combine, and let me turn on the that was the cut back here on this back side, and then I'll mirror that, and so we see now those tabs are mirrored to the other side, and I'll put the top on. Now I need to cut the tabs into the top. We've already cut the tabs in the back, so let's go one more step. So that's where I cut the tabs in the back. I'm going to edit that feature, and I'm going to add two more tool bodies. So I'll add this as a tool body, and this is a tool body also, so that it cuts those tabs in the sides of the top as well as cutting the ones in the back. And of course I want to keep though these sides, so I'll say okay to that. And then I go one more step, and that mirrors it to the bottom, and because everything updates, the bottom part is okay as well. Now we could have just created one side, or one top and one side, and then done a circular pattern of those actually as components. Actually, as a component, this component is identical to that component, so we really only need it one time when we're doing our laser cut. Okay, let's see. Let's put those slots in the back. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit sketch number 1, and I'm going to zoom in on this. Now, the way to do this, there's several different ways. We could do one feature and then pattern it, or we could do a sketch. For a simple, something this simple, I'll probably just do the sketch. And so I'm going to sketch a line down here. Actually, let's do a rectangle. I'll do a 2-point rectangle. And I'm going to change these two lines to construction. So I'll crossing window select those. I'll change those to construction. And so that keeps this line the same length as that line by having these construction lines across here. So doing that with a rectangle. I'm going to draw a line out here, and I'll draw another line over here. And I actually got that perpendicular to this line, which it is, but I don't really want that. I want that to be horizontal. So let's put that horizontal on here. Okay, I should have avoided this line over here, but it is what it is. I'm going to dimension this distance from here to here as 35, and I should have done this earlier to fully define it. And I'm going to dimension the distance from here to here as 107, and then I'm going to dimension the distance from here to here to the origin, if I can get this, and I want to do that as a thickness. Now I was expecting at that point for it to become fully defined. If it doesn't fully define, then you drag it and you see, oh, I see that I still need a vertical dimension. Before I put that vertical dimension in here, I'm going to do a midpoint constraint between this line and this line, and a midpoint between this line and this line. I'm going to make these two lines equal to each other, and I'm also going to make this line equal to this one, so it'll be that 35. Okay, and then I'll dimension that height. So I'll dimension the height from the origin to this line, and that distance let's do as 230. So now it's fully defined, it all turns black, and we have much fewer dimensions than was in the original design. Let's repeat that same process up here. So I'm going to draw a rectangle up here. I will change those two lines to construction. I'm going to put a horizontal line here, and I'll draw another horizontal line over here. I'm going to do midpoint between this line and this line, midpoint between this one and this one. I'm going to do equal. This line is equal to that one, and this line is also equal to this one, and this line is equal to this one. Alright, then I'm going to put some dimensions on here. So I'll dimension this as 195. And I'm going to make these two collinear between here and here. So I'll do collinear. This line is collinear to this line. And I'm still in the dimension command. I need to get out of that. I'll do collinear. Okay, so that moves that over collinear. Now, if we want a different dimension in there, put a different dimension in. I decided to make that collinear, line those up, make it look aesthetically pleasing. I'll dimension this distance from here to here, and let's do that as 64.5. Okay, we see that all turns black. It's all fully defined. I'll finish sketch. Turn that sketch visibility on. And then I'll do my extrude. I'm going to put it on thin feature. I'll select these 4 lines. Now if you have trouble selecting it from the top side, just go back to the back side. I have it set to select through the object in my preferences. And then I'm going to just drag this arrow up to visualize it, and I'm going to tell it for the distance I want to go through all. And for the wall thickness, I want it to be thickness variable. And let's look at this from the front now. We see that it's going over here to the sides. I want it to go to the center, so I'm going to change that to center. So now we see that it follows the centers of those lines. Now these lines, we might be able to use those same lines to start to create the components that go inside of here. Now we have one other issue that we're going to run into. When the laser cuts this, it's going to leave a fillet here in the corner. It can't cut perfectly straight 90-degree corners because of the diameter of the laser. The same way on all these finger joints, we're going to have an issue here where when we try to put these together, they're not going to go together because of those fillets in the corners. So we need to add what's referred to as dog bone features in all of those inside corners. You can search the internet for laser cut dog bone finger joints to get some images or some information on some different types of these finger joints. But basically we cut out these corners because the laser is going to leave a fillet that will interfere here if we don't do that. Now there are some utilities available that do this automatically or semi-automatically in Fusion 360. I'm going to show how we can do this manually, and then if you want to go out and get one of these dog bone utilities for Fusion to automate the process, you can do that.